When your own family sends you a wedding invitation with instructions to use the service entrance, it's more than just a message. It's a reminder that you've always been an outsider. That's what I received. Not a real invite, not even respect. Just a side door and a seat near the kitchen. My name is Clara Hudson. I'm 37. And while my siblings drive luxury cars and wear designer labels, they say I'm the disgrace of the family. What they didn't know, what no one knew, is that I own the future. They pretend to understand. Tonight, I let them see the truth, but not before they tried to bury me one more time. The gold-foiled envelope shimmered beneath the morning light, elegant and regal. Everything my family believed themselves to be. The embossed calligraphy spelled out my cousin Elijah's full name, paired with the name of a socialite I had never met. Their wedding was rumoured to cost over $500,000. Every detail screamed wealth, pedigree, and status. And yet, when I turned over the invitation card, my name wasn't written in the same gilded ink as everyone else's. Mine was a printed label, slightly off-center, attached like an afterthought. Below it, italicized instructions read, "Guests arriving without luxury car credentials, please use service entrance B. No +1s permitted for non-VIP family members." I read it twice, then again my fingers tightened around the envelope. So that's what I was now, non-VIP family, the kind of guest you route through a side door to avoid cluttering the front. I set the invitation down carefully, as though it might stain me if I held it too long. For a few moments, I simply stared out my kitchen window at the maple tree that had just begun turning amber. Its leaves drifted to the ground like the layers of patience I had shed over the years. This wasn't new, it was just the latest installment in a lifelong pattern. As a child, I was the quiet one, the one who didn't stand out in holiday photos or win math competitions like my brother Bradley. I was the kid who made her own Halloween costumes from cardboard instead of wearing designer outfits like my sister Vanessa. My mother would always sigh at my thrift store finds. "Why can't you look polished like your cousins?" she'd say. Family dinners were even worse. The conversation spun around business acquisitions, stock portfolios, or country club memberships. When I'd try to share something, an article I wrote, a project I started, I'd get polite nods at best, or worse, that familiar look from my father. The tight-lipped smile that meant that's sweet, but not real success. And now, the wedding invitation. It was less about celebration, more like a formality, a way to say, "We included you, but please stay in your corner." They didn't want me to bring a date, as if anyone would want to come with me anyway. When I'd be seated next to the kitchen, drinking water while everyone else sipped Crystal. I opened my laptop. A new email notification popped up from a school district in Nebraska, confirming a 3-year contract renewal. "Looking forward to expanding our partnership," it read. I smiled faintly. This would bring updated tech education tools to over 5,000 students. But who would care? Not my family. To them, I was still the girl with the 10-year-old Toyota and shoes from last season. Part of me wanted to throw the invitation away, just forget the whole thing. But then I thought of Elijah. He wasn't like the others. When he was younger, he'd spent hours in my garage workshop learning to solder circuits and asking about AI. I'd secretly funded his scholarship application to MIT through one of my programs. He never knew, maybe he never would, and maybe that was enough reason to go. I folded the invitation and placed it back in its envelope. Then I walked to my bookshelf and pulled out the small wooden box that held the last letter my grandmother had written me before she passed. She'd always seen me, not just noticed me, but seen me. The letter was soft with age, the ink slightly faded, but her handwriting still clear. Claire. They may never understand the world you're building, but you weren't made to impress them. You were made to change something bigger. When the time comes, don't hide your light. Let it burn. I traced her signature with my fingertip, feeling the heat rising behind my eyes. If she were alive, she'd have demanded a front-row seat at the wedding. She would have worn red just to stand out, just to remind them all that quiet power is still power. I looked at the invitation one more time. Service entrance, I almost laughed. Let them have their velvet ropes and valet lines. I'd take the side door, and when the time came, I'd step through it, carrying the weight of everything they had overlooked. They wanted me invisible, but they had no idea. I've always done my best work in the shadows. For a full week, the invitation sat on Seoul. My kitchen counter, unopened. Not because I hadn't already read it, but because I couldn't stop looking at it. Like a wound you can't help poking just to feel the sting. I told myself I wouldn't go. What was the point? Another night of tight smiles, passive jabs, and being asked, "So, are you still doing that charity stuff?" in a tone that made it sound like I was hosting lemonade stands for spare change. But the truth is, there was one reason I couldn't ignore Elijah, the groom. Years ago, he was just a lanky, awkward 12-year-old with a crooked smile and a stutter. He'd come to my house every weekend asking questions about robotics and digital tools like they were secret keys to another universe. I'd seen the same hunger in his eyes that I once had. The need to know more, to break away from a family that only valued what could be flaunted. He never knew it was me who funded his MIT summer program. I never told anyone. I didn't want credit. I just wanted him to have a shot. I never did. Now he was a grown man standing at the altar, and I couldn't let his big day pass without being there in some small way, even if I had to enter through the kitchen. So I made the decision I would go, not for them, for him. The morning of the wedding, I stood in front of my closet longer than I'd care to admit. I owned designer clothes. Not many, but enough to blend in. Still, I reached for my usual, a tailored navy dress, simple heels, and a pendant that once belonged to my grandmother. I didn't want to wear a mask. They already didn't see me. Why should I pretend? As I drove toward the venue, an extravagant estate perched on a hill overlooking the coast, I found myself clutching the steering wheel tighter than necessary. The familiar tension settled in my shoulders, the one that always came with family gatherings. It wasn't the judgment that hurt most. It was the dismissal, the feeling of being tolerated, like background music you could mute at any moment. I remembered a summer afternoon when I was 10, standing in our living room as my mother tried to coax me into joining a piano recital I had no interest in. I was not born to do great things, she had said in Vietnamese, words meant to soften the disappointment. You weren't born to do anything big. She probably forgot she ever said it, but I didn't. I carried that sentence like a stone in my pocket, small, silent, and impossibly heavy. Every achievement I earned was met with a backhanded compliment or silence. When I built my first educational software prototype, my brother called it cute. When I launched the first version of our learning platform, my sister Vanessa asked, "Do you actually make money doing that?" When I landed my first seven-figure government contract, no one even returned my message. It wasn't just what they said, it was what they didn't say. No congratulations, no pride, just absence. I turned off the highway following the signs toward the estate. As I passed rows of cars, Bentleys, Teslas, one ostentatious Rolls-Royce, I felt a familiar pang. My Toyota hummed steadily, dependable, but invisible, just like me. Pulling into the designated overflow lot, I parked beside a catering van. I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Same woman, same uninvited heart, but not the same story, not this time. I took a deep breath, stepped out of the car, and made my way toward the winding path that led, of course, to the side entrance. The gravel crunched underfoot like a whispered warning, "Stay small, stay silent." I ignored it. They could keep their chandeliers and red carpets. I had something stronger than an invitation. I had every reason they gave me to quit, and still I showed up. Let's see how invisible I could really be. The estate loomed ahead like something out of a royal fantasy, stone pillars, cascading ivy, and valet attendants in matching suits. I followed the line of luxury cars until a man in a black vest waved me aside. "Ma'am, the guest parking is to the left," he said, eyeing my Toyota with a flicker of distaste. I nodded silently and turned down a narrow gravel path. It led to a shaded lot near the back of the property where delivery vans and staff vehicles clustered like forgotten chest pieces. The main entrance was nowhere in sight. I stepped out, smoothed my dress, and began the long walk past the dumpsters and loading docks. A few servers rushed by, arms full of platters. One gave me a quick smile, mistaking me for a vendor. Fitting. Just as I reached the back terrace, another security guard stopped at me. "This area is for event staff only," he said, stern but not unkind. I pulled the invitation from my purse and pointed to the bottom. He read the italicized line and frowned. "Right, apologies, the side entrance is just through there." Side entrance. The words echoed in my head like a private joke no one else could hear. I followed the stone path to a secondary doorway tucked beneath an overgrown archway. No welcome mat, no grand staircase, just a plain door with a buzzing lock. Inside, the contrast was staggering. I stepped into a corridor behind the main ballroom, dimly lit, lined with catering carts and floral buckets. Through a cracked door, I glimpsed crystal chandeliers glittering above crowds of guests in black tie glamour. The real celebration was just inches away, separated by nothing but a wall and a lifetime of being left out. As I emerged into the reception area, I saw Bradley near the bar. He turned just in time to catch sight of me, his expression morphing from surprise to smug disdain. "Well, well," he said, strolling over, drink in hand. "Look who finally made it. I was beginning to think you got lost on the way in." "I used the entrance listed on the invite," I replied evenly. Bradley laughed, gesturing at my navy dress. "Ah, makes sense. That outfit's definitely more service staff than guest list." I swallowed hard, not because his words hurt, but because they didn't surprise me. He'd always been like this, cruel, but always with a smile. Our childhood rivalry had never faded. It had just evolved into class warfare. "Don't worry," he added with mock sincerity. "There's a table near the kitchen where they're seating the inspirational relatives. You'll fit right in." Before I could respond, a young server passed by and paused. She looked at me, eyes wide, then whispered it, "Excuse me, are you Claire Hudson?" I blinked. Yes, her face lit up. "Oh my God, you're the founder of Brighter Path, right? I got my scholarship through your program. It changed everything for me. I'm studying applied tech at Riverside now." I felt heat rise to my cheeks, not from pride, but from the jarring contrast. Just seconds ago, I'd been reduced to a punchline. Now, in the same breath, I was someone's hope. "That's wonderful," I said quietly. The girl smiled again before hurrying off, tray in hand. I turned back to Bradley, who looked mildly confused. "What was that about?" "Nothing important," I said, and walked away. But it was important. For the first time that evening, I felt something shift. Not in them, in me. I didn't come here to prove anything. I didn't wear designer labels or pull up in a Porsche or network over hors d'oeuvres. But I built something that mattered. And someone in this place, someone who didn't know me by blood, had recognized it. Not because of the car I drove, not because of my dress, but because of what I'd done. I reached my table and took a seat near the wall, as far from the stage as possible. From here, I could see everything. The chandeliers, the polished laughter, the sparkling bubbles of champagne dreams. Let them sparkle. I had no desire to outshine anyone. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't going to let them dim me either. The linen napkin at my table was the only thing that felt remotely dignified. Everything else, the chipped chair, the rattling AC vent above me, the clang of dishes from the adjacent kitchen, screamed afterthought. I was seated beside a pantry door that swung open every few minutes, releasing the smell of bleach and overcooked salmon. This wasn't just an oversight, it was deliberate. From across the room, I could see the family table near the floral arch. The centerpiece alone was larger than my entire table. My brother Bradley held court beside my sister Vanessa, both dressed in coordinated emerald and black. They looked like magazine models, their smiles polished and impenetrable. Vanessa spotted me first. She raised an eyebrow in theatrical surprise and nudged Bradley, who turned, saw me, and then leaned back in laughter. Moments later, they stood and began to make their way over. I braced myself. "Well, Claire," Vanessa said, eyeing my corner, "they sat you near the kitchen." "That's fitting," Bradley chuckled. "Careful, sis. Don't insult the caterers. Claire might be their supervisor." Their laughter was soft, but lethal, the kind that slides beneath your skin before you even realize you've been cut. I sipped my water and said nothing. Vanessa leaned in slightly, her voice honeyed but sharp. "Still driving that little Toyota. You know, guests have been asking if it belongs to the valet." I looked at her, then at Bradley. Both wore expressions of superiority so deeply ingrained it was practically genetic. "It runs well," I said calmly. "No need to replace what works," Bradley smirked. "Right. Just like your career. Functional but unimpressive." The burns settled deep this time, deeper than I expected. They didn't need to yell or insult me outright. Their weapons were familiarity and history. They knew exactly where to press. I turned my gaze to the ballroom. Glasses clinked kit. A string quartet played something elegant around me. No one noticed the exchange. That's the thing about being invisible. You can be hurt without anyone seeing. For a brief second, I considered leaving. Just standing up and walking out, maybe even speeding away in my unremarkable car with the windows down and my pride still intact. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him. An older man, maybe in his 70s, walked toward my table. He wore a simple grey suit, well fitted but not flashy. His hair was silver, his gait unhurried. He didn't carry himself like the rest of the crowd. There was no urgency to be seen, no need to impress. He stopped beside me, and without introducing himself, he leaned down slightly and said in a voice only I could hear, "Tonight is a momentous evening, but not just for the bride and groom. It's the night the truth begins to come into the light." I blinked, startled. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" He smiled, warm and unreadable. "Not yet, but you will." Before I could respond, he turned and walked away, vanishing into the crowd with the grace of someone who'd been watching from the sidelines for a very long time. I stared after him, heart suddenly thudding in my chest. Not from fear, but from something else. A shift, a presence I couldn't explain. Bradley and Vanessa were still talking, but I no longer heard them, their voices blurred into the background, overtaken by the echo of that stranger's words. The truth begins to come into the light. It sounded like a warning or a promise. For the first time that night, I didn't feel small. I felt something waking up, a tension rising in the air like the first breeze before a storm. Something was coming, and this time they wouldn't be the ones holding the spotlight. The music softened into a string-laced instrumental, and laughter swirled around me like perfume I couldn't quite breathe in. But my mind was far from the ballroom. It was somewhere colder, smaller. A cramped dorm room with a cracked window at MIT where everything had started. Most of my family never even knew I'd gotten in. I told them after the acceptance letter arrived, the day I also learned I'd been awarded a full academic scholarship. Tuition, housing, stipend, the works. My mother blinked twice, then said, "That's nice, but are you sure you'll fit in there?" My father added, "You could always transfer after a year if it's too much." No one celebrated. They hadn't even attended my graduation. I was valedictorian of my class. Me, Claire Hudson, the invisible girl who used to fix broken clocks just to avoid dinner conversations. I stood on that stage in front of thousands, cap and gown, heavy with achievement. And when I looked into the crowd, the seats I'd reserved for my family were empty. They were in Napa that weekend. Vanessa posted a photo from a vineyard with the caption, "Family First." I remember staring at it from my dorm, wondering if irony had a breaking point. When top consulting firms sent me offer letters with six-figure salaries, I declined every one of them. Not because I wasn't grateful, but because I had a different kind of blueprint in mind. I didn't want to fix corporations. I wanted to fix classrooms. I wanted to rebuild Access from the ground up to give kids the tools I had to claw my way toward. Not everyone gets lucky. I wanted to change that. So I built it. A non-profit, small at first, one software module, a handful of users. I spent nights coding, testing, revising, teaching on weekends just to pay the bills. The early years were brutal, but I loved every second. The family didn't. You went to MIT to become a charity case. Bradley scoffed once. That's like buying a Ferrari to deliver pizzas. Vanessa was more diplomatic. It's sweet that you want to help, but real impact happens in boardrooms, not classrooms. And my father, he was blunt. You're spitting on your legacy, Claire. We offered you the CEO position at Hudson Equity. You'd rather play school teacher. They called me ungrateful, self-righteous, even irresponsible. But the truth was, they weren't upset that I failed. They were angry that I'd succeeded on my own terms. Being a Hudson meant something to them. It was a brand, and I was the off-label product. No one quite knew what to do with me, so they filed me under other and moved on. The hardest part wasn't their rejection. It was the quiet hope I carried for too long, that one day they'd turn around, that someone would look at what I'd built and say, "We were wrong." It never came. Even after the first state contract, even after the second, even after the non-profit expanded to 20 schools, then 50, then entire districts. They'd hear about my work through the grapevine and dismiss it with a shrug. "Still doing that software for poor kids thing?" Bradley asked at a Christmas dinner once. I nodded. He poured another glass of wine, and the conversation moved on. Tonight, surrounded by gold-trimmed menus and white roses, those memories pressed in close. The resentment, the disappointment, the ache of always being one achievement. Away from acceptance and never quite getting there. Across the room, I caught Bradley laughing with the groom's father. Vanessa posed for selfies with a group of influencers. Their world hadn't changed, but mine had. I wasn't that girl anymore, the one who waited for validation. I'd built something real, something lasting. But still, part of me whispered, they don't see it. They never did. And maybe they never would. Somewhere between the champagne flutes and the chorus of string instruments, my thoughts drifted to her. Grandma May, the only person in the Hudson family who never looked through me, who, despite the designer handbags and perfectly trimmed hedges, always managed to see past the gloss of family legacy and into something far quieter, potential. She called me Little Gear, said I had a mind that never stopped spinning. While others gifted me dresses or jewelry, she gave me old radios, circuit kits, and once a typewriter from 1948. She said it was important to understand how things were made before you tried to remake them. The last time I saw her, she was in hospice, thin, pale, her voice barely more than a whisper. But her eyes, those warm amber eyes, still sparkled like they held the beginning and end of every storm. "I wish I could see what you become," she said, her hand trembling in mine. "You already do," I told her. She smiled, but then she grew serious. "Claire, there will be a moment, maybe tonight, maybe years from now, when the people who ignored you will look, not because you changed, but because the world did." She pressed a small envelope into my hand, sealed with wax and her initials. "Don't open this until you need to remember who you are, not who they say you are." That envelope had stayed with me ever since, tucked inside my wallet like a talisman. I'd moved it from purse to purse, suitcase to suitcase, apartment to apartment, but I'd never opened it until now. My fingers trembled as I reached into my clutch and pulled it out. The wax seal had cracked over the years, but her writing remained elegant and sure. I slid the letter free, unfolded it, and took a breath. "My little gear, they'll tell you to wait for recognition, for permission, for their validation. Don't. If the day comes when you've built something worthy, don't wait for them to see it. Show them. Let your work speak louder than their silence. Let your life reflect what they refuse to imagine for you. And if they still don't clap, clap for yourself. You are more than their ability to understand you. I am proud of you already." May the tears came before I could stop them. Not loud, not dramatic. Just quiet drops falling into my lap, soaking the bottom corner of the letter. I folded it carefully, tucked it back into my clutch, and sat there for a moment, breathing in the truth of her words. Don't wait. Show them. Tonight wasn't just a wedding. It wasn't just another evening of being underestimated and pushed to the margins. It was a crossroads. I looked up at the chandelier above, then around the ballroom, where laughter spun like silk, and everyone wore masks of superiority. They didn't know it yet, but I was done hiding. My life had value, not because of their approval, but because of the thousands of lives touched by my work. Because of the children who'd opened their first laptops thanks to a grant I wrote. Because of the schools that now taught coding to students who once had no internet. Bradley's hedge fund couldn't do that. Vanessa's fashion line couldn't touch that. I had impact, real, measurable human impact. And tonight, that truth would no longer sit in the shadows. I reached into my phone and opened an app, one I'd built from scratch with a team of 20. On the dashboard, live analytics. Thousands of students online, courses completed, scholarships activated, lives changed, and it was only 7:42 p.m. I closed the app and stood slowly. Tonight, Grandma, I won't wait. I'll show them. The creme brulee had just arrived when the house lights dimmed slightly and the music faded to a soft hum. A hush fell over the room, and the MC, an overly enthusiastic man in a glittering tuxedo, stepped onto the small stage at the front of the ballroom. "If I could have everyone's attention, please," he said into the mic, his voice syrupy with performance. As we celebrate the union of Elijah and Madison, we want to take a moment to recognize a very special guest, someone who made a tremendous impact on this event and, more importantly, on the future of many deserving young minds. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Bradley, seated 2 tables away, leaned forward slightly. Vanessa adjusted her necklace, already assuming the spotlight might be for her. The MC continued, "It's our honor to acknowledge this evening's primary education partner, an organization that has provided full-ride scholarships for several young members of the Hudson extended family, enabling them to attend prestigious universities they might never have dreamed possible." My stomach twisted. No, he wasn't going to say it. Not here, not now. And so without further ado, please join me in thanking the Brighter Path Foundation for their generosity and vision. The ballroom erupted in polite applause. I remained frozen in my seat, pulse pounding. The MC raised his hand again. And we are especially privileged tonight because the founder of Brighter Path is actually here, seated among us, quiet, unassuming, and clearly far more humble than any of us realized. A spotlight flicked on. It moved slowly across the crowd, scanning curious faces, and then it stopped on me. The applause faltered into stunned silence. My heart beat so loudly I thought others might hear it. I could feel dozens of eyes pivot toward me, confused, skeptical, some even narrowing in disbelief. Bradley looked around, then back at me, frowning. Vanessa's smile twitched. My mother's wineglass tilted slightly in her hand. The MC beamed, clearly unaware of the bomb he'd just dropped. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Claire Hudson, founder and executive director of Brighter Path." I couldn't move for years. I had worked in silence. Let the platform grow. Let the partnerships bloom. Let the impact speak for itself. I didn't need applause. I didn't need lights. But now they were on me. And the silence in the room was no longer dismissal. It was shock. Slowly, I rose from my chair, napkins sliding to the floor unnoticed. The walk to the front of the room felt impossibly long, as if time had slowed, and every step echoed with the memories of being overlooked, laughed at, diminished. I reached the stage. The MC handed me the microphone. "Would you like to say a few words?" I looked out across the sea of familiar faces, people who had never once asked me what I truly did, who I truly was, who had for decades chosen to define me by what they thought I lacked. The words rose slowly, but not yet, not tonight. I smiled faintly, raised the microphone to my lips, and said simply, "Thank you." And then I stepped away, nodding once to the MC, and returned to my seat. The silence followed me like a shadow, but this time it was laced with something new: recognition, respect, and for the first time in a very long time, wonder. I sat down, heart still thudding from the spotlight. The applause barely faded when the MC raised his mic again, and before we continue, we'd like to share a short tribute video prepared by the Brighter Path Foundation. A glimpse into the lives they've changed. Please direct your attention to the screen. The ballroom lights dimmed once more. I hadn't seen this video. My team must have sent the media file earlier, assuming I'd approve it on the fly like always, but I hadn't even opened the email. A hush fell over the guests as the massive screen flickered to life. The opening shot was of a public school hallway in Detroit. Peeling walls, humming fluorescent lights, backpacks slung over tired shoulders. Then came the voiceover, smooth and warm, paired with footage of kids in front of laptops, their faces lit not by pixels, but by possibility. Every future begins somewhere, the narrator said. For these students, it began with a spark. Clips rolled of children learning to code, of teachers receiving training, of classrooms being fitted with smartboards and fiber optic internet in places the rest of the world forgot. Then came a testimonial from a young woman in a Navy graduation cap. "Without Brighter Path, I wouldn't be in college today. I wouldn't be here telling you this." A man appeared, grizzled, tired, but smiling. "My son got his first computer from this program. He now teaches me how to use email." The guest was still watching. The screen went black for a second. Then a new scene emerged, a press conference crowded with cameras. The US seal in the background, a podium, a banner reading White House Education Partnership Summit. And there I was, standing beside the president, my name printed on the placard in front of me, Claire Hudson, CEO, Brighter Path Foundation. He was signing a document, a $50 million federal initiative for underserved school districts nationwide. I was nodding beside him, flanked by senators, cabinet members, and education leaders. The footage zoomed in slightly, the narrator continued. Claire Hudson has quietly led one of the most transformative educational tech efforts in the country. She declined press, she declined titles, but she never declined a child who needed a chance. Silence. Dead, stunned, electrified silence. Then one sound pierced it. A single clap, slow, deliberate, from the head near the floral arch. Elijah, the groom. He stood still clapping, his eyes fixed on the screen, his expression something between pride and awe. The room followed. One by one, the guests joined in, hesitant at first, then fully. A tide of recognition that swept through, people who only moments ago didn't even know who I was. I sat still as the applause rose, unsure where to look, unsure what to feel. My mother's hand was frozen mid-air, her wineglass trembling. Bradley's jaw was tight, unmoving. Vanessa had gone pale, her lips parted like she meant to speak but couldn't find a script. The lights came back on. The MC returned to the stage, clearly riding the wave of revelation. And there you have it, folks. Not all heroes wear capes. Some wear navy dresses and sneak in through the side door. Laughter, genuine this time, rippled through the crowd. But I wasn't laughing. I was remembering the nights I slept on couch cushions in a shoebox apartment while building the first prototype. The teachers who cried when I delivered boxes of tablets to rural schools. The moment I got that White House call and thought maybe they dialed the wrong Claire Hudson. And now here I was, revealed not by my choice, but by my work. Across the ballroom, Elijah made his way toward me, still in his tux, still glowing from newlywed joy, but now layered with something else: reverence. He knelt beside my chair, leaned in, and said quietly, "It was you, wasn't it?" I looked at him. He didn't need to say more. "Yes," I said. His eyes glistened. "You paid for that summer program, the one that got me into MIT?" I nodded. He exhaled shakily. "Why didn't you tell me?" Because I didn't do it for thanks, I said. I did it because you reminded me of me. He reached for my hand and squeezed it. I wouldn't be standing here today without you. The applause was fading, but the room hadn't returned to normal because it couldn't. The mask had cracked, and what they saw underneath wasn't weakness. It wasn't failure. It wasn't the family disappointment. It was power. Not loud, not flashy, but real, earned, unshakable. I sat back in my seat and let the silence fill the space left by revelation. It wasn't just about being seen anymore, it was about being undeniable. It didn't take long for the tide to turn. By the time the dessert trays had been cleared and the band picked up again, the family members who had spent a lifetime ignoring me now treated me like an unwrapped Christmas miracle. Suddenly, I was fascinating, worthy of inquiry, magnetic even. Vanessa approached first, her voice dripping with faux warmth. "Claire, darling, that was unexpected. You never mentioned you were doing anything so important." Bradley wasn't far behind. "Oh, Munsin," adjusting his cufflinks like he was about to pitch me an investment deal. "Seriously, that White House thing, impressive. I had no idea you were even in the tech sector." I smiled lightly, sipping from my water glass. "You never asked." That stopped them both just for a second, but not for long. "Well, we're asking now." Vanessa laughed too loud. "Honestly, you've become quite the star tonight." Claire tilted her head, met their eyes, and said with all the calm of someone who had finally stopped chasing validation, "You've always liked shiny things. Well, does this sparkle enough for you now?" Neither of them responded. I didn't wait for them to find a witty comeback. I turned to go, slipping toward the outer edges of the crowd. That's when I heard the voice, male, confident, not quite formal. "Excuse me, Miss Hudson." I stopped. A man in his late 30s stepped forward, clean-shaven press badge around his neck. "I'm Aaron Michaels, Senior Education Correspondent for the Chronicle. Would you have a moment?" I hesitated. I wasn't expecting interviews tonight. He smiled. I wasn't expecting a philanthropic tech giant to be seated next to the dish return either, but here we are. I chuckled despite myself. Fair point. I'm working on a feature about transformative figures in education, real impact stories. When the Brighter Path piece rolled in, your name popped up everywhere, but you've stayed unusually under the radar. Was that intentional? I nodded. The work's never been about me. "Well," he said, glancing at the crowd, still abuzz. "It is now." I handed him my card. "You can reach my communications team Monday. They'll coordinate. Thank you, Miss Hudson, and congratulations on all of it." As he disappeared into the flow of guests, I turned back to find a small crowd had begun forming behind me. Extended family, distant cousins, even my Uncle Charles, who once declared at a Christmas dinner that I'd be better off finding a man who makes real money. Now he was smiling like we'd always been close. "Claire, incredible story tonight. Really so proud of you. More came. How long have you been doing this? Why didn't you ever say something? Do you know Elon Musk?" I gave the same answer to each question, a smile, a shrug, a gentle deflection. The truth is, I had nothing left to prove. But as the crowd grew, pressing in with curiosity disguised as support, I began to feel boxed in again, not by rejection this time, but by fascination. And strangely, that felt just as confining. So I stepped away. Elijah caught my eye near the champagne tower. He lifted a brow, silently asking if I was okay. I nodded, then motioned toward the exit. A few others followed. My Aunt Lydia, who had been quietly kind over the years, my cousin Mia, who used to sit with me at the kids' table long after we'd both outgrown it, and even Vanessa, surprisingly subdued. "Now ing somewhere?" she asked, trailing behind me. "I thought I'd show you something," I said. "Where?" "Home." Her brows rose. "You want us to come to your house?" I smiled. It's time someone saw the real Claire Hudson. And with that, I walked through the golden doors of the ballroom, not as a side door guest, not as the forgotten sibling, but as myself. The drive to my house was quiet, awkward. Vanessa sat in the passenger seat, scrolling her phone half-heartedly, clearly trying to process the night's revelations. Behind us, Bradley followed in his Porsche, tailing a little too close, like he didn't want to risk missing the turn into my neighborhood. We pulled into my street in Millbrook, a modest middle-class enclave lined with similar two-story homes and neatly trimmed hedges. The kind of place my family had always mocked for being starter home territory. I could already hear Bradley in my head. "This is where you live." And I did, but not quite in the way they imagined. As we parked in the driveway, Vanessa stepped out, eyes scanning the exterior. "It's nice," she said, tone flat with surprise. "Not what I expected." "Wait till you see inside," I said, unlocking the front door. The foyer was understated. Cool-toned walls, minimal decor, soft lighting. Nothing screamed luxury, but everything was custom, optimized for function and energy efficiency. My living room opened into a seamless kitchen with touchscreen controls embedded in the counters and glass cabinetry that adjusted opacity automatically. A soft hum came from the integrated climate system tuned precisely to every zone in the house. Bradley whistled low as he stepped inside. "Okay, I'll admit this is high-end. I thought you didn't like homes without marble pillars and wine cellars," I said lightly. He shrugged, hands in pockets. "Guess I just didn't realize nerd money could go this far," I smiled. "You haven't seen the good part yet." I led them to a locked side door beside the kitchen. Most people assumed it was a laundry room. I tapped my thumb to the biometric scanner and the door slid open. Vanessa blinked. "What is this?" "A workspace," I said. "Come on." We descended a narrow staircase into what looked like a cross between a data lab and a NASA command center. The room was cool, lit with soft LEDs. Banks of monitors lined the walls displaying real-time analytics from schools across the country. Interactive maps pulsed with live engagement data, while rows of servers hummed quietly behind soundproof glass. Mia gasped softly. "This is incredible. This is where I built Brighter Path. I said everything you saw in that video, it started here. We now support over 1,200 school districts in 47 states." Bradley stepped forward, studying the dashboard. Are those live stats?" "Yep," I said. "Current users, completed courses, engagement rates, grant distributions." He walked closer, eyes narrowing. One screen showed a logo, blue, geometric, sleek. His mouth opened slightly. "Wait, I know that brand." I followed his gaze. The logo belonged to Lumenbridge, a tech startup that had quietly grown in the education market the last 2 years. He turned slowly toward me. "I reviewed this company last year. Their Series A pitch came across my desk. I passed." "Why?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Because the founder refused to disclose parent ownership. Said they wanted to stay under the radar, and the core concept seemed too idealistic at the time. I called it, what did I say? A passion project disguised as a business." I tilted my head. "That sounds familiar." His face flushed. "Lumina is yours." I nodded. "One of our incubation brands. It handles adaptive learning platforms for neurodiverse learners. We kept it quiet so it wouldn't get tangled up in Brighter Path's non-profit structure." Vanessa covered her mouth. "Oh my God, you let him pass on it," I shrugged. "It wasn't a test, but poetic, don't you think?" Bradley ran a hand through his hair. "That company is now valued at what? $60 million. 63 last quarter, but who's counting?" He let out a shaky laugh. "I passed on a company my own sister built because I thought it was too soft." "Because you didn't know me," I said. "You never tried." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, it was necessary. The silence lingered long after the last screen went dark. In that silence, something unspoken shifted. Years of detachment, disbelief, and deliberate ignorance unraveled like old thread, and then finally a voice cracked through it. "Why didn't you tell us? It was my mother." She stood at the edge of the
lab, arms crossed but trembling, her expression a strange mix of confusion, guilt, and awe. Her heels clicked softly as she stepped forward, her eyes scanning the room. This room I'd built, lived in and grown within a room she never once asked to see. I mean, my God, Claire, All this time, this is what you've been doing. Why didn't you say something? I inhaled slowly. My answer wasn't cruel, but it was honest. Because you never asked. She winced slightly. That's not true, isn't it? I said, voice steady. You asked if I was still playing with computers. You asked why I wouldn't take the CEO job at Hudson Equity, but you never once asked what I loved, what I believed in. You listened for what you wanted to hear, and when it wasn't that, you tuned out. Tears welled up in her eyes, and for the first time in my adult life, I saw my mother not as the matriarch of the Hudson name, but as a woman confronting her own blindness. I just didn't understand, she whispered. I know, I replied. But understanding only comes when you try. And for years, no one tried. She lowered her gaze, lips trembling. Claire, I'm sorry. The words didn't fix everything. They didn't erase. Birthdays missed, calls ignored, dreams dismissed. But they mattered. I walked to a drawer near my desk, pulled out a thin file, and handed it to her. She opened it hesitantly. Inside was a deed. Her breath caught. What is this? The Belmont estate, I said. Grandma May's house. The one the bank repossessed 5 years ago. I remember, she said, her voice faint. We tried to save it, but no one could pull together the funds in time. So I did. She blinked. You what? I bought it back, I said quietly. Put it under a trust in Grandma's name. It's been maintained. Taxes covered. No one ever needed to know, but I didn't want it lost. Vanessa gasped behind her. Bradley's eyes widened. You saved the house? He asked, incredulous. That house was gone. I nodded. Not to me. It was the only place I ever felt seen. My mother's hands shook as she held the paper. You didn't tell anyone? No, I said softly. Because like everything else, I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because she deserved to be remembered properly. My mother's tears spilled freely now. She stepped forward, her voice ragged. I failed you. I didn't answer because I didn't need to. I simply took the deed back, returned it to the drawer, and said, It's not about failure, Mom. It's about what you do next. For a moment, the room was still. Then Mia, my cousin, broke the quiet. Cla, can we see it? What? The house, she said. Grandma May's. Could you show it to us sometime? I smiled. Yeah, I'd like that. Bradley leaned against the wall, arms crossed, brow furrowed. He looked like he was doing math in his head, trying to recalculate a history he thought he understood. You've been doing all this, he murmured while we mocked you. Yes, I said. You laughed at the car, the clothes, the silence, but you never asked about the substance. And now, Vanessa asked, tentative, do you want us to what? Apologize? Make it up? I shook my head. I don't want anything. And it was true. I'd already gotten everything I needed. I had built a legacy piece by quiet piece. Not for them, but in spite of them. And now that it was visible, I didn't need applause. I needed clarity and maybe, just maybe, healing. My phone buzzed in my pocket, slicing through the heavy silence that lingered in the lab. I glanced down at the screen. Dr. Harris, Stanford University. I turned away from the group and answered. This is Claire. Claire, Dr. Harris said warmly. I won't keep you long. I just wanted to call personally. The board has approved the exclusive partnership proposal. We are greenlit to launch the Brighter Path STEM initiative this fall. I closed my eyes for a beat, absorbing it. That's wonderful. The full contract is valued at $38 million over 5 years. He continued with options for long-term expansion. It's the largest single commitment Stanford has made to K-12 education. My chest tightened, not with nerves, but with something gentler. Validation. Not from family, from impact. Thank you, I said. I'm honored. As I hung up and turned back toward the room, I found my mother still standing where I'd left her, holding on to the edge of the desk like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Stanford? She asked softly. I nodded. She looked away, then back. Her eyes shimmered, but her voice was steady. Do you forgive us? The question landed harder than she intended, not because it was cruel, but because it was vulnerable. I took a deep breath. Forgiveness, I said, isn't about making someone else feel better. It's about freeing yourself from what they did. She flinched a little. I stepped closer. I've carried your expectations like stones in my pockets, and for years I thought I had to earn your approval to matter. But I've learned something else.
I reached for the small wall safe behind my desk, entered the code, opened the door. Inside were 2 thick bundles of letters wrapped in twine, handwritten, folded, some smudged with pencil marks, others written in blocky crayon, a few typed out by early learners. I carried them to the table and set them down. These, I said, untying the first bundle, are thank you letters from students, from parents, from teachers. Thousands of them. I held up one written in neat cursive, addressed simply to Miss Clare. It read, "Thank you for giving me my first laptop. I never thought someone like me could learn to code. Now I help my brother with his homework, and I want to be a software engineer." I handed it to my mother. She read it quietly. Her lips parted, then closed again. Another letter from a principal in a rural school district. We had no digital access before Brighter Path. Now every child leaves our building with real-world skills. You didn't just give us tech, you gave us belief. I laid more letters on the table, dozens, then hundreds. My worth, I said softly, isn't defined by where I sat at the wedding table or what car I drive or how silent I've been. It's here in the lives changed, the futures rewritten. The kids who now believe they belong in places like MIT. Vanessa's hand reached for a letter, trembling slightly. "These are more than thank yous," she whispered. "They're proof." Bradley said nothing, but he didn't have to. His silence finally sounded like understanding. My mother folded the letter slowly and looked up at me. "You don't need our validation, do you?" "No," I said gently. "I never did. I just wanted your curiosity, your willingness to ask." I began placing the letters back in the safe. "Forgiveness," I repeated, "isn't for you, it's for me so I can move forward without carrying your silence anymore." As the lock clicked shut, the room felt different, lighter. Not because the damage was undone, but because it was finally acknowledged. We wouldn't forget what happened. But maybe, just maybe, we could begin again. The McLaren hummed beneath me like a living thing, sleek, silent, powerful. Midnight blew under the moonlight, its curves sliced the night air as I turned onto the tree-lined road leading back to the estate. I hadn't planned to return, but something in me said the evening wasn't finished. I'd left quietly hours ago through the side door. Now I approached the main entrance. The valet blinked when I rolled down the tinted window. "Mum, I'm on the list," I said, handing him the gold-trimmed invitation. His eyes widened at the car, then back at me. "Of course. Welcome back, Miss Hudson." I stepped out slowly, heels clicking against the marble tile, and walked through the grand archway like someone stepping into a memory that had changed shape. The party had shifted. The early chaos of celebration had given way to slower music, gentle chatter, and a glow of softened lights. But the moment I entered, heads turned. Conversations paused, and then they came. First a cousin I barely knew, asking to catch up sometime. Then a second cousin with a half glass of wine and a full smile. Then Vanessa, this time with sincerity behind her eyes. "I thought you left," she said. "I did," I replied, "but I hadn't said goodbye." She hesitated. "You always had an exit strategy," I tilted my head. "You just never noticed I had an entrance too." From across the room, Bradley approached with a slow nod. "Is that the McLaren 720S?" I smiled. "Good eye. You've had it this whole time?" I sipped my water. Some things aren't meant to be paraded. They're meant to be preserved until the moment matters. He chuckled softly. "Well, this moment matters." It was surreal watching people who once mocked me now hang on every word. But I didn't gloat. The glow I carried wasn't from vindication, it was from peace. Then, from the far corner of the ballroom, I saw him, the silver-haired man in the simple grey suit, the one who had whispered to me hours ago, "Tonight is the moment the truth comes into the light." He stood beside the piano alone, sipping sparkling water, watching me, not with awe, but with familiarity. I crossed the floor toward him. "You again," I said gently. He smiled. "Didn't I tell you the truth would find its stage?" I narrowed my eyes. "You knew about the video, the foundation, about me." He dipped his head. "You're not just some guest, are you?" "No," he said. "My name is Andrew Rothwell." The name caught in my throat. Andrew Rothwell, philanthropist, billionaire, education reformist, the man behind half of the most transformative school initiatives in the country. The elusive mind who rarely appeared publicly, but whose influence ran deep through my entire field. "You funded Brighter Path's first national expansion," I whispered. He nodded. "Through a private channel?" "Yes," I blinked. "Why?" His gaze softened. "Because I believed in you long before anyone else did." I stared, heart pounding. "We've never met, haven't we?" He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a folded envelope, aged paper, the same wax seal as Grandma May's letters. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a photo of me, 7 years old, sitting on Grandma May's lap, holding a soldering iron. He placed a hand gently on my shoulder. "May was my first love long ago, before marriage, before politics. She never told you." My mind spun. "But that means I'm your father," he said, voice low. "Not by title, perhaps, but in blood, in belief, in legacy." The floor didn't shift. I did. Everything I had built, everything I had carried, it all made sense in a different light. Not because it was his, but because even when he was hidden, he believed. "I never wanted to interfere," he continued. "You had to walk your own path. But I was always watching." Tears burned behind my eyes. "You funded me anonymously, guided me without credit." "I did what fathers are meant to do," he said. "I made sure your light had room to grow, even in the shadows." We stood in silence as the party moved on behind us. The girl they ignored, the woman they finally saw, and the lion who watched in silence until it was time to roar. The ballroom spun quietly behind us, muted now, irrelevant. The air between me and Andrew Rothwell felt thick with history, most of it unspoken. "You were there?" I finally asked. "All these years watching?" He nodded once slowly, not in the way you might think. "I respected May's wishes. She chose to raise you without entanglement. Her strength, your strength, came from that choice. But you still followed my life. I never missed a step," he said. "From your first robotics competition to your MIT acceptance, I helped push through your fellowship quietly. No one ever knew. A chill ran through me, not from fear, but from the overwhelming gravity of what he was revealing." "You could have told me," I said, voice tight. "I could have," he agreed, "but that would have made the story mine, and your journey needed to belong to you." He stepped back slightly, giving me space to breathe. "You built Brighter Path. You created a movement. Not because someone opened a door for you, but because you found the damn key and built a new one when it didn't fit." I swallowed hard, trying to reconcile this everything. My life once painted in rejection and isolation, now redrawn with quiet protection. A father I never knew I had, a billionaire no less, had watched every triumph and every stumble from the wings. You gave me seed funding, and when needed silent course corrections, he confirmed through intermediaries, non-profits I controlled, not to influence your mission, but to ensure it survived the noise. I blinked. The anonymous donor from year 3, the platform server upgrade I couldn't afford. He nodded again. "You," he smiled, "you gave me something too. Purpose again, legacy. And now standing here, I want you to know you never needed my name." I looked at him, really looked. This man revered by governments, sought after by global institutions, wasn't asking to be embraced as a father. He was affirming that he had always believed in me as a creator, and that meant more. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring, not flashy, just a silver band etched with a circuit board design. I had this made the year you launched Brighter Path, he said. I never wore it. It was a reminder that some of the most powerful things in life come quietly, grow slowly, and emerge unstoppable. He placed it in my palm, then closed my fingers around it. You are the future of education, Claire, and whatever name you carry it well. The music shifted behind us. The party was wrapping up, but something inside me was just beginning. Later that night, I stood alone in my bedroom, the soft glow of a table lamp illuminating the space. I moved to the mirror. For years, I had studied this reflection, trying to understand who I was through the eyes of a family that never truly saw me. I'd worn politeness like armor, dressed humility in silence, let myself shrink to make others more comfortable. But not anymore. In the mirror, I saw a woman forged in fire and silence, a builder, a leader, a daughter who had become her own lion. I slipped the ring onto my finger. The silver gleamed under the light. I didn't need a last name to validate me, didn't need anyone's permission to exist loudly, fully, and truthfully. My eyes met themselves in the glass, sharp, focused, unblinking. And then I said it aloud just once, just for me. I don't need to be acknowledged. I just don't want to be forgotten anymore.